my role as the owner of the country is not to, be preoccupied by giving credit to my servant.
We have said that if we are
BBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
A lovely morning to you once again. In case you've just joined, I'm Robert Chirabo. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra, an extension of Good Morning Uganda. And in the same spirit, we discuss issues or matters of national concern aimed at creating awareness, knowledgeability levels, but also drafting a way forward on issues that are affecting us. Now this morning, we want to look at East Africa as a region, more so looking at the just concluded elections and the court petition in our neighbors here in Kenya, what it means to the rest of the member states. Of course, we know you have different historic backgrounds, and these could have an impact, but what lessons, if they are, for us to learn? And joining me this morning is a very interesting politician. This man has been around for some time, and he has been known as a Democratic Party person. He is currently the Vice President of the Democratic Party, but also concluding his tenure at the East Africa Legislative Assembly. And come December, he will be done with representing Uganda at the regional parliament. And that is none other than Honorable Fred Mukasa Mbide, the man many refer to as the Poko, Koto, and so on. Honorable, you're most welcome.
Thank you, my brother. I greet you, our viewers. Good morning.
Honorable, when I last hosted you here, you told me that, Robert, I want to assure you this election must end in court.
Yes.
I told you why. You said there are a number of areas, and actually among them were among the 9 that you presented. Unfortunately, court did not see any iota of truth or credible evidence to bank what you had thought would see the light of day into this petition that was dismissed, though each party had to cater for its course. Let's begin with that legal bit of it. You as advocates who thought maybe there was enough evidence to cause nullification of this election.
Yes, there is usually a problem. The dichotomy between what happened and the decision of the court is usually something that clients will cry about. I can, my brother, tell you that even if a judge himself on his way to office found anybody administering rape, that same judge will need evidence. Even when he himself is a witness, will need evidence in order for the accused to be adjudged guilty. And that evidence has to find its way before courts of law, if courts will make a determination in favor of the one who is aggrieved. Now, in Kenya, there are occurrences that anybody can talk about. My colleagues, the lawyers, relied a lot on majorly the provisions of the Constitution giving detail on how, for example, the commission arrives at its final determination of the winner. Now, for the viewers, what you need to know, and of course these are being indicated as if they are cast in stone, but these are very easy things. The forms that people have been talking about. Anybody, because even in Uganda here, all of us lawyers, even when you are dealing with the company law, the forms are given in numbers. You know that even when you are dealing with bonds, a police bond is given a number. It is Form 18. So all of these things have got numbers. Now, in respect to Kenya, Form 34A is generally the DRR form at a polling station. So people don't think that this is psychology or this is science. Now, that form, once it arrives at the center, it is used to generate Form 34B. Now, a sum total of all the Forms 34B will definitely now be used to establish the Form 34C, which ultimately now, the declaration form is what they call the Form 34D. Now, our colleagues relied on first of all, the disagreement between the commissioners and the declaration that seemed an independent and an individual, the suo motu activity by the chairman of the IEBC. And we'll definitely tell you that that did not mean that there was a result that was declared as a presidential election winner. Now, I would ask you, for example, could the chairperson of the IEBC have tendered minutes of a final decision of the commission on who won?
I highly doubt.
You couldn't have minutes. But that was an angle that was not taken by my colleagues. So a lot of things, because you see, there is a lot of the period between losing an election, filing a petition, and the nature of the evidence required. That period is usually, you know, lawyers work 24 hours. They don't go home.
Because you had 7
coming up with documentation of a coverage of an area of the whole country. I can tell you it is not an easy thing. If judges also were, they gave themselves close to a day, 2 days, but still they didn't come up with a full judgment. They only agreed on all the issues and created a framework of agreement. The judgment is yet to be given. It may even take some 20 days to be written. Now, you must give credit to all the lawyers. Now, this is something. When you look at, for example, in Uganda, Sam Kutesa and others versus Attorney General, the decision is clear that the Honorable Sam Kutesa was obviously being pursued, was being prosecuted by the IGG. But you can imagine that the IGG did not have a deputy IGG. There are 2 other portfolios that had not been filled. And the decision of the court, according to the petitioners, they said, no, the Inspectorate of Government is not a single office. It's not full. Accordingly, it is not there. And that so
it lacks quorum to cause meaningful mandate of that
without
decision.
Quorum, there is no inspectorate. And that is the decision that was taken by our good courts here. That is law applicable all over East Africa. The decisions that are taken are cited all over. You will find in Kenya people citing decisions that were, of course, from petitions lodged by Uganda. For example, when you hear any decisions that are being made, they will cite Mukasambida versus the Secretary General of the East African Committee and Attorney General of Uganda. Anything to do with the elections of Yala, nobody can petition any court without citing that case. You will have lost. So, they are all over. We are all under common law, and we have a wealth of jurisprudence from all courts. Now, but when the courts sat, they said, okay, there is something that we expected that we didn't get. When the commissioners also disagreed, they also petitioned, but they did not bring out the evidence that was necessary to persuade the court that actually our disagreement was not a last-minute boardroom rupture, but it was incumbent upon activities that we are engaged in, including this, including that, hacking. Now, when they wanted to enter into the system properly, of course, the smart company said, no, this now includes the infringement in our own rights. Because then that would mean almost even delivering what would be akin to the formulas on how even the system itself was created. So I can tell you that evidence, according to the courts, and we respect court judgments, because this is there is no appellate process after the Supreme Court has taken a decision. So probably evidence was not as material enough to create a hypothesis that is contrary to the results that were declared. Number 2, courts are also organic. They are born out of societies where petitions arise from. There must have been a measurement before their lordships in terms of whether or not it was really necessary to cancel an election. What are the repercussions? Because they are people. And I have often called it the Holy Trinity. That is what existed in court. The Holy Trinity, in a sense that you had lawyers for the petitioners, that is number one, lawyers for the respondents, that is number two, and lawyers called the judges, that is number three. So the Holy Trinity sat and said, hey, what can we do for Kenya? Despite all of this, I think we must save the proper, the kind of peace, the intent that exists, let it remain. We will deal with the rest. So, because you can imagine that on the date of judgment, of course, all roads were cordoned off leading to court. Most of the roads, and there was, the army was put at standby and everything. So anybody would wish that, I think, these guys can do some wonders. Their lordships also knew that in Parliament, for example, none of the leaders has got the 2/3 majority. At county, at Senate, at the House of Representatives, even in terms of governors, nobody has. So clearly these people must work together if they seek to propel a proper, to illuminate the course of Kenya afresh.
Now, Honorable or Council, now we are into away from the legalese that you've explained, also giving us your view of how you looked at this petition. Now let's go back to the democratic process of Kenya, which we see a number of East African member states are cherishing, even some above Africa, saying, well, we saw some uniqueness out of Kenya politics. Do you see this, or it was just a process well managed?
Kenya has generally taken some time to arrive at where they are. But of course, also they have got some advantages that ideally would have been disadvantages. They have got a robust consolidation of ethnic decisions, ethnic support, ethnic direction, ethnic mobilization. They have got what they call ethnic nationalism. That an ethnic group, for example, will believe in a leader. And clearly, that leader, there is a cross-sectional structure that once the ethnic group believes in the leader takes decisions that are believable by that ethnic group. At the same time, that leader also now is almost a tail of a dog, being wagged by the dog itself, called the ethnic group. So you can find that there is a symbiotic relationship between their leaders and the ethnic groups.
They believe in their leader,
yes.
The leader believes in them and acts on their behalf.
Yes. So it is easier in Kenya to obtain consensus on matters because you are dealing with people that have got a cross-sectional command structure within their own ethnic groups. Now, in Uganda, there is the death of social strata. We do not have a leader, for example, whose decisions can cut across an ethnic group. We have got people that contradict even the cultural leaders themselves. So now in Uganda, that one, we don't have it. Number two, the Kenyans have dealt with the power of bias successfully. They do not believe that political parties are almost akin to religions. No. A leader knows that a political party is a wagon. It must be a wagon. It is a set of, it is a registered entity, but particularities that give regard to whether or not one would belong to the same should include one, who is the leader of that party. Two, what are the programs? Three, what is the history? Four, what are the promises? Five, who are the sponsors? You can imagine that that is now something that Kenya has also evolved over time. Somebody can be, if you look at the winner, for example, you cannot wake him up and in a twinkle of an eye ask him which party he belongs to. Probably he doesn't know. Now he's Kenya Kwanza. Then so it is, these are wagons. Now in Uganda, because we have got, for example, pre-independence political parties, there are some people that belong to those parties almost as if they have got axiomatic faith in those parties, which is akin to religious faith. So now that is also some disadvantage that we have in Uganda. Now the bias that we have in Uganda include, among others, if they found you talking on the phone with the president of Uganda and you are actually a member of another political party, I can tell you that the amount of bias that people have in their own hearts will include, among others, the animosity that will be generated around you, the hatred, the hula baloo, the tamarind,
it will be betrayal,
everything against you, simply because you have cooperated with the president of Uganda. So we have got people calling themselves opposition, but who are lost in Uganda. They do not know the difference between opposition and rebellion. Now, rebellion includes, among others, you not recognizing that there is a government. You don't recognize that there is one. In fact, even your address must not be as clear as possible when you are dealing with rebellion. For example, those who rebelled in 1980 against the government that had been elected, their address was not permanent. They went to all sorts of bushes until they came here. So that was that. But those that chose to oppose the government, they even took oath and joined the parliament. Their addresses are known. Some of them would be escorted home almost every day. Now that is opposition. With the opposition, you realize that there is a government that you are opposing and that yours is the alternative. And that the opinions you have are alternative to the opinions espoused by the government that exists. That now implies there is no Chinese wall between you and that government. Now, until we get to know that. So in Uganda, when you assume a position of rebellion as the opposition, government assumes a position of a fight against you. So the tools are different.
So we have a rebellion.
If you are rebellious.
Not an opposition.
Yes.
And
No, it is not even substantially a rebellion. It is a hochi-pochi of opposition thinking that it must be rebellious in nature. They are not accurate at any of the decisions. You get the point. Because even rebellion itself, that's not how we do it. If we were to do it, this is not how we must have done it. So you are now causing government to prepare tools against what you are doing. They find you as if you are rebellious, the tools include security tools. They find you as if you are opposition, the tools are political. So now you find a mixture.
So the modus then
so it is a multiplicity of approaches.
Yes.
That is why you find people are arrested, others are imprisoned, others are killed,
others are bought off.
Yes, others are bought off. Now that is the politics. And so government begins to deal with the capacity to stay, possibility of staying longer than actually delivering, because there is no politics that requires them to deliver. Now in Kenya, that doesn't exist. Kenya all over time has you know, the leaderships have been working together. When you look at, for example, all the former presidents, they all worked with the first president of the country.
Yes.
Except, of course, the son who was younger, but at least that is understandable. Now, when you find President Moi had erected his own political party towards his independence with other friends called KANU, which he dissolved and joined KANU, thereby becoming the Minister of Internal Affairs. Now, Odinga, Jaramogi, was part and parcel of KANU, working with Kenyatta in the beginning towards independence. You can imagine he had been even promised when Kenyatta was in prison before independence. He had been told by the Britons to take power. He rejected that power, saying, no, my master is in prison, how can I take it? They told him, you are capable. Are you not capable? He said, how can I be more capable than my master? So he rejected the opportunity to take power until the master was freed, took power, and he became his vice president. Now, the politics that ensued was to the extent that within a period of only 3 years, he was relegated to the opposition. Now, that is the historicity of the divisions that ultimately now landed Kenya into what Uhuru wanted to do, building bridges. Now, what bridge was being built? When Raila Odinga gave a speech after the handshake, he said, when did the rain begin to beat us? A man that allowed you to leave prison, fought for you to leave prison, take power, is the man that actually you ejected from office three years after. Up to today, he has not been able to take power. Even the son is representative historically now of the father. It is appearing as if the East is versus the West. So they had now united Kenya, and I think that was an opportunity for them to move forward. Now, if you don't go, that is how Kenya looks at it. But there were facts that now you need to look at that were intelligence facts. Number one, we used to have a division between the pro-East and the pro-West, pursuant to which side one were during the Second World War.
Benefits better.
Second World War. So the Americans were actually the leaders of those that they were the pro-West entity. Then, of course, Russia were the leaders of the pro-East entity. Now, Kenya chose, and with the Jaramogi Odinga and the Kenyatta, they said we will remain non-aligned, just like what exists now between Ukraine, Russia, and of course that means now America and on the one part, and Russia on the other.
Where many African states have said we take a neutral position.
So they took a neutral position, but the United States refused to accept that they did. So the ambassador of the United States in Kenya still continued to work. He continued to deal with all members of the Legico, deal with the politics of the day, trying to create a rift between Jaramogi Odinga, who was actually communist in nature, and Kenyatta, who was now a capitalist in nature. They created rifts until now Kenyatta started playing around with the politicians of the day, ejecting Odinga, inviting Kibaki, working with Dr. Like, then Moi, to the extent that by the time he died, Moi was now the vice president and who ultimately now took power. Now, Kenya has lost out on sorting out that problem. I told you one time here that each step in a country's political development is a result of definite experiences for that country. You can look at countries. When you look at Burundi, for example, their history is to the extent that they had fights. Several presidents, including Dadai, were killed while in office. There has been a fight and antagonism between the Tutsi and the Hutu, and that created the order of the day of politics in Burundi. After the 10-year civil war, the Arusha Agreement, they decided that no, let us divide the power in terms of, one, the Hutu are overly populated. The Tutsi are actually meagerly populated, but they are extremely brilliant also. They have been, of course, they had overpopulated the army, even when actually in terms of population they are less. Yes. Because they, of course, they had successive stages of leadership of Burundi. Now they merged their armies and they decided to divide the state in terms of 60-40. From top to bottom, even when you are appointing teachers, 60% should be Hutu, 40% should be Tutsi. That kind of division, that kind of dichotomy is trying to assist Burundi into proper processes. When you look at Rwanda, for example, the Constitution of Rwanda, articles probably 10 and 62, have also give effect to what we call consociationalism. How do you recognize the rights of the minority? Because it does not mean that because there is a minority, their views do not count. This is how they do it. A president and a speaker of the House of Representatives cannot come from the same party. That is the law. Number two, a party with the majority in parliament cannot have 50% of cabinet. That is number two. So when you look at that, then you know that after an election, whether the president has won by 98%, you will not have walk to work.
Because many stand to benefit.
They know he has won the presidency, but he has lost two things. One, the speakership. Two, majority cabinet ministers. They will come from the parties that have lost the presidency. So there you are dealing with a consensus from the word go of a country.
Here it is the winner takes it all.
Here. And which is illegal, because the Constitution says all power belongs to the people. Now, when only a section of the people determine the direction of the country for 5 years, you have created a section of the powerless. Are they not part of the description of the word people?
That is a definition of democracy.
No. The Constitution is supreme. It clearly states that any action, law, regulation, decision that contradicts the constitutional provisions, it is to that extent unconstitutional. And these are things that lawyers need to look at and politicians need to look at. So when the Democratic Party takes a step to begin a dialogue, we are trying to remove the corridor of the powerless. All the constitutions of the world, when you look at the constitutions...
But then you're seen as opposition traitors.
Yeah, it's...
People who have been bought off, self-seekers.
That is the power of bias and the low relative political maturity that exists in Uganda. Because you don't have to be bought to do a correct thing. It is just correct. Ideally, it is just correct. So, tell me of one serious opposition contender for presidency, except the 2021 election, that has never been a minister. So for me, that does not make sense. And Ugandans, you know, political commentators have a problem. They are like a frog in a pot. It begins to think that the size of the sky is actually the size of the mouth pot, the pot mouth. It is only when you break it that they realize actually the sky is way huge. They were even covered in a small thing. So that is what we are trying to do. The Democratic Party is now trying to break the pot. Because there must be now, we must get back to where it matters.
So Honorable Mukasa Ambide, rightly given us the genesis, the different wise decisions that our counterparts went to create equality or balance, and for us we still believe that the winner takes it all. Many have argued that that may only be possible because we have different historical backgrounds, that we are moving our lane because that is what our history dictates. They are moving different because that's where history dictates. That some things are not universally or regionally acceptable. The differences we can't beat.
First of all, the kind of difference that we can be should not be to the detriment of our own future. There are a lot of similarities. We are all, for example, colonized by one company, the Imperial British East African Company. Most people call it Britain. But you see, they just use the company to colonize us. Number two, we all emerge from the historicity of cultural leaders, of leaders that were generally. And you know, by necessary conformity, the leaderships that were leading the particular regions in Uganda were not leaders based on election. They were not leaders based on knowing when to exit. One would cease governing a country, that sub-region that we used to call countries. It is upon death that somebody else would lead. That is what existed. We were all colonized, the same entity. We were all divided into special regions and areas for purposes of production of raw materials. We all suffered. In fact, Uganda suffered. So what are the problems? Kenya discovered that their major problems are two. One, corruption, and two, service delivery. They recognize that the government is too far to recognize. Like here in Uganda, if you went to Karamoja and showed them a portrait of the president, then you showed them the portrait of their own chief, they would recognize the chief very fast. If the president is not dressed in his characteristic uniforms, for example, the yellow shirt or the army combat, they may take long to recognize who he is if he doesn't have a cape. And you know, he even puts on things so that he can be recognized easily. Even on the ballot paper, if he does not put on, for example, he struggles to either be number one on the ballot paper or the last. Then he puts on a cap so that he can be recognized. If you have led the country for 35 years and you still think some people don't know you, then that means the government, which is the state, is so far from the people. So when then the next thing they recognized the Kenyans was corruption. So they dealt with it when they were enacting their 2010 constitution. Two, they established regional governments. Very robust regional governments. Here in Uganda we call something decentralization. It's not true. What we have is deconcentration.
We've extended services and authority.
We are exercising central government authority, but from closer to the people. We have not given them authority to be exercised. So the cow, the what, they are all not appointed by anybody in the district. So they are sent as delegates and representatives of the central government. The central government does now its work closer to the people, but it is doing its work. So if it is misinformed in terms of what the people want, that is all they do. Now, in Kenya, the county governments, if it is not about campaigns and mobilization, they would never even care who leads Kenya, because now their counties are almost enough and robust to have them led well. So then number two, the corruption issue was solved by establishment of Chapter 6 in their constitution. The chapter on integrity. You do not compete for office in Kenya unless you have got a certificate of integrity. If you are the kind that has just fought with your wife and she rushes to police, you can be stopped from obtaining that certificate if you still have something to solve at police. There was a judge who almost missed out on a job simply because she had slapped a maid. So they are trying to solve their own problems by establishing institutions that can do so. In Uganda, our major problems, one, we used to have leadership changes, but majorly by the gun. The governments were as temporary as the lives of people, for example. So that one has been solved by the NRM. We have had long stay by one government. But now it is becoming again a problem. You know, there are times when an advantage now develops disadvantages along the way. The second one would have been, of course now we don't have stratification is in terms of regions that know what to do. We don't have the relative political maturity of the masses. Using the relative political maturity thermometer, if you measured Uganda's political maturity, you go to and meet the, for example, there is something they call politics. I have been meeting traders when I was still chairman of the Committee of Communications, Trade and Investment. You meet traders and there are things you begin speaking and they say, no, for us we are not part of politics. Then you ask them what they understand with politics. Politics is about who charges you how much tax, when and where, what does he do with the tax, and you are saying you the traders are not part of politics. And now that is the country. In Kenya, Raila Odinga does not conduct his political activities using personal money. There was a time he asked me what we do. We said, no, for us we use our own. Then he laughs. He said, hey, you use your personal money. Are you going to lead for yourself? Because that is the understanding of Kenyans. It is the business entities, it is the people to fund the process of politics, because you are ideally going to work for them. Here in Uganda, if you call it a personal investment, definitely now, who is the beneficiary? The investor. And this is what is happening in Uganda. So Uganda, we have lessons to learn, but I am telling you, we have a very brilliant social structure that can even overtake Kenya if we only begin to do the correct things. We fight the power of bias. We begin to understand that politics is not religion. We begin to understand politics in terms of who takes what, when and where, and for how long. Because that is how it has been espoused. We begin to understand that politics is divided into two, politics in general and politics with bloodshed. Politics in general must include elections and all of that, so that when politics in general grows to a stage beyond which it cannot proceed, then war must break out to resolve that contradiction. We should always avoid the contradiction. We must always use the politics, and this is where now dialogue comes in. Then we shall realize that, one, we have never had a multi-party political dispensation in Uganda. We have missed out on that point. So what did Kenya we approve through the referendum? What we have are registered political parties. We have never had a dispensation capable of forging change and transition is using political parties. The political parties themselves are not led by those that know what they are leading. They are not membered. You cannot go to a political party and ask for a register of members and they give it to you, including their own addresses. Very true. We are dealing with what we call bandwagon effect. Today, the people that support this candidate tomorrow will support another. He cannot begin claiming that those are party members. So there is a problem. You cannot now give details of a political system. For example, we have never had a political party producing a party list of candidatures. If you ask now, you wake up one of the political party leaders and you ask him, okay, what is first past the post system of political proportional representation? You may not have proper answers. So they don't know. Now, if you have got a political party, you are not expected to know, for example, economics, science, but you are expected to have all a forward policy study unit of that party, a policy research committee of that party, and a wealth of those that know each and everything, to the extent that when government is given to you, you just begin running it. In Uganda, we don't have it.
And
so,
Honorable, that is one of the things then makes me wonder, was it the wrong foundation? Because
yes.
When we talk about the politics of Kenya and we want to look back home, you find that there's been so much investment in political parties that now even some are worried that maybe with Uhuru Kenyatta's marriage and then Raila Odinga, what next? But I think looking at our political parties that you say are just registered, of late now we are having pressure groups that end into something similar, then they get registered. Now we are also having agreements. Some are looking at them slightly as marriages. It's like a mixture of so many things.
The difference is one. You look at political parties that were freed, the freedom, because multi-party political dispensation is a rights-based entity. So for you, if you want to know the difference between what the political parties in Uganda and those in Kenya, for example, you look at the difference between the parties that were freed before 2002 and those that were freed after 2002.
Well, these ones, it was conditioned for grants, help, and all that.
So the ones that were freed at 2002 were just qualifications for grants before the G8 at Kananasiki. Those that were freed before that were probably, there is a mixture of rights and conviction. Because ideally, when you look at all governments that were during the OAU, they had their infamous Article 3 of the Charter, which was stressing, of course, the principle of non-interference in what they called internal arrangements and matters. That allowed the presidents to kill whenever they needed, and other countries would never interfere. Now, the Constitutive Act of the African Union, of course, informed majorly by the establishment of these other entities, grants, the G8 pressures, and all that. So the parties created, for example, in Uganda after 2002, were not created so that they can run a political process and either form government or not. They were created so that our government can obtain the badly needed loans. And of course, they would get waivers under the highly indebted poor countries. They are processes that began in 1998 when Gordon Brown was still the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the chair of the IMF, the committee of the International Monetary Fund. When they forgave all the highly indebted poor countries loans, and that the same would be channeled to fostering universal primary education. What our people here thought are actually programs that were espoused by government, and you don't blame them.
Yes.
Ugandans here don't read. In fact, if war breaks out in Kampala, for example, and there is looting, the only safe business is a bookshop. Nobody will loot it. You ask them why are you not looting this bookshop? They say there is nothing, just books. So in Uganda, that is what exists. So I can tell you that we missed out on the objective reasons that made it a logical necessity to have parties. So in Uganda, what we have always had is one entity in the government stifling all the operations and the capacities of the rest. So what we have now in Uganda is not even a political party in power, because others have erroneously described it as a one-party rule. No, the political party called NRM is part of us. We are all suffering. It is on the opposition. What is in power is a government. It is a different entity from NRM.
Well, Honorable, time is really not so much on our side, but let me just get your parting shot regarding what we should treasure out of Kenya.
Yes.
2, what do you envisage seeing now the Ruto, also Uhuru, who is out? I was watching an interview and it seemed like, has he congratulated you, not so, you know, where do you see Kenya, briefly?
One, I am worried that none of the leaders has the 2/3 majority anywhere.
Yes.
That means that they must work together. I am also looking at a political outfit that is most likely will be coached between Uhuru and Raila Odinga for the next political dispensation in Kenya. That will galvanize ultimately the Kikuyu vote and the Western vote. If Ruto does not take a lot of care, he might be a one-term leader. And that is most likely. Then, of course, for any processes and procedures that will be up for implementation, they will need to work together. The first test we shall have is whether Honorable Kalonzo becomes Speaker. If he does, then, of course, what I am talking about will be concluded. If he does not, then, of course, we will see factors and combinations that will foster major fights and the antagonism up to the next election. So, most likely, they are going to keep President Ruto in a campaign mood for the next 5 years. Here in Uganda, what we need to do, we need to realize that we need to start the common fight afresh. We lost on starting, and we must start. We must fight bias, and it is very important that the one who is leading thinks now this is the process we must undergo. We must stop the idea of people wanting to be employed by government. We must now begin to get leaders that think that government is theirs. They must employ it to serve the people. That is the most common thing that should happen in Uganda. Bias must be removed, and I think the power of the population to determine transition has been hampered by their inability to comprehend a changed state of affairs. If the population continues to vote for you, not because of what you can do for them, but because of how you look on the campaign poster, then we still have a problem in terms of that relative political maturity. So it is a top-down in Uganda. It is not the down-top. It is only when the elite sit down and sit down, dialogue, come up with the processes and procedures, then provide the results as varieties for the population to choose from, that we shall have the best future for Uganda.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Honorable Fred Mukasambide, who happens to be the Vice President of Democratic Party, one of the traditional political parties in Uganda, but also our representative to the East Africa Legislative Assembly, serving his term, and come December, he will be fully back home. And of course, we'll congratulate him for the good service there. Have a lovely day. God bless you. His will possible. See you tomorrow.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
The Tales of Kasozi, brought to you by Uganda Communications Commission.